But first, we have our very special speaker. Marcelo Clare is Chief Operating Officer at SoftBank Group Corp., a Japanese multinational conglomerate, and is a member of its board of directors. He is also Chief Executive Officer of SoftBank Group International and Chairman and Chief Executive Officer of SoftBank Group Latin America. He serves on the board of ARM, a leading global chip technology developer, and is Executive Chairman of the board of Sprint Corporation, one of the world's largest telecommunication companies. As Chief Executive Officer of SoftBank Group International, Marcelo oversees group operating companies including ARM, Sprint, Brightstar, Fortress, SB Energy, Boston Dynamics, and WeWork, among others. Marcelo is credited with transforming Sprint, one of the world's largest telecommunication companies, serving 54.6 million customers in nearly 200 countries. In his 4 years as CEO, Sprint grew revenues and reduced expenses while improving product and service quality. Sprint is currently seeking government approval to merge with T-Mobile. Upon merger completion, Marcelo will join the board of the new company, which has a total implied enterprise value of approximately $146 billion. That's a lot. Interviewing Marcelo will be our Startup World Cup chairman, Anis Uzman. Please help me in welcoming both of them to the stage.
Thank you.
So hello, everyone. So we have our special guest who actually, with his busy schedule, he still made it in time. So we have Marcelo Clare. He is the COO of the SoftBank Group, right? And he also actually is an entrepreneur. So he is here. So Marcelo, why you are here? That's the first question I have.
So I thought I had a chance to win $1 million, so.
Can he participate in this startup competition? Maybe he should try next year, right? So a round of applause for Marcelo for coming all the way.
Thank you.
So one great thing about Marcelo is that Marcelo is an entrepreneur himself. Actually, he started his own company, and he took the company to a massive level. We call it unicorn. Actually, it's bigger than unicorn. So Marcelo, why don't you take us through your journey at Brightstar that you have put together, and how did it finish?
Great. So thanks for having me here. And when I heard the World Cup and the fact that they're going to choose who's going to be the next great entrepreneurs, I couldn't resist myself but figure out a way to get here. So I'm like most of you. I started my life as an entrepreneur. I started a very small company called Brightstar. I started selling phones from the back of my car, and we figured that there was a lot of potential inefficiencies in terms of how phones were being moved around the world. And we formed what started as a distribution company, evolved to a supply chain company, utilizing analytics to massively make the industry a lot more efficient, turned into an insurance company, the largest buyback and trading company in the world. And a few years later, Brightstar became the largest distribution and supply chain company in the world in the wireless industry, became the largest Hispanic company ever founded in the United States. And it got to the size of, by the time I sold Brightstar, we had revenue of $12 billion, and we were in 70 different countries. So it was quite a nice ride of starting something with $100 and eventually turning it to be a $12 billion enterprise, being the largest in the world of what we did.
So it was an unicorn. What year was that?
We started in 1997, and and I sold it in 2014. So it took us 17 years. It took us, I think, like 6 years to get to $1 billion.
Wow.
So it was a nice growth.
So what was the biggest hurdles you had to create $1 billion company? Like, because we have a lot of entrepreneurs here, and please share your story. The main struggles you had as you into the $1 billion in revenue, and how did you overcome that?
So I think access to capital at the beginning. Today we live in a much better era for entrepreneurs. There's been so many successes that there's a lot of venture capital available today, but back in 1997, that wasn't the case. I mean, back then you had to basically use banks to lend you money. As you know, banks are quite conservative entities, so access to capital was a bit difficult. But once you have a proven business model and you show that you can scale, that you show that you can globalize the business, then it's it's amazing the amount of late-stage capital that got involved. And I would say the toughest part was, yes, it's easy to get early success and prove your concept, but that initial first rounds of capital were quite difficult for us to get. I think the first equity raise that we did was $150 million. Wow. But that was on year 5 or year 6. So the first 5 years was bootstrap and just borrowing money from whoever was willing to listen to us. So that was one of the biggest challenges in terms of having good access to capital.
But you raised a lot of capital. Who was your investor at that point?
At that point, there was a company called Falcon out of Boston, then Prudential Capital, that's quite a conservative investor. That was the first round. Then a few months later, or a few years later, we raised money from a company called Lindsay Goldberg. We raised $350 million. And then I had my Masa episode, my SoftBank episode that forever changed who I am today.
Okay. So then you sold the company to Sprint, I guess, right?
No, so the story is Brightstar was growing very fast, and we turned SoftBank into one of our customers in Japan.
Okay.
I had the chance to meet Masa, and he loved what we did for him. We started running all the supply chain for all the used iPhones in Japan.
Okay.
We did quite good. Masa invited me to be in the board of Sprint.
Okay.
And then at that point in time, Masa was trying to buy T-Mobile to do this merge, and the government declined the merger. So Masa offered me the job to become the CEO of Sprint.
Okay.
Out of which I reminded Masa that I had a large company called Brightstar. Mm-hmm. So then Masa told me that he wanted to employ me. So he decided to buy Brightstar from me in exchange for me joining Sprint as a CEO.
Wow. So Masa ended up buying Brightstar in some sense, right?
Correct.
To get in touch with you, right, basically?
Correct.
So then you joined Sprint, and I know that after you joined, Sprint went through a massive change, right? Can you explain us a little bit about that, and how did you change the revenue and everything else?
Yeah, so it was very difficult as an entrepreneur to basically land in the middle of the US in Kansas City to a company that was 119 years old, was in massive financial dire straits. It was the previous year had lost $5 billion. The last 5 years combined, Sprint had lost $25 billion and was losing millions of customers. They had an employee exodus, the lowest customer satisfaction, and landing in a company like that and giving it back its entrepreneurial spirit and showing people that we could transform the company was quite a task. So we undergone a 5-year transformation that included, building a network utilizing non-traditional methods. It included probably doing the largest cost reduction ever made. We took out $7 billion of cost out of the business. We put really good, compelling offers. We changed the brand. We borrowed the "Can you hear me" guy now from Verizon and switched him to Sprint. Yeah. And that was the best national campaign of the year. And 5 years later, Sprint delivered, I would say, the best financial results in its 120-year history. And then we decided that it was the time to merge it with T-Mobile. Okay. We're in the final stages of the approval of getting this merger approved, which will create one of the world's most advanced 5G telecommunications companies. And we are so excited to do this because we believe that this new company is going to power a lot of the future entrepreneurs that are going to be in this country. Right. And we think that 5G is forever going to change the landscape of what happens next in the next wave or the next revolution of entrepreneurship.
So is ACC still holding it back for you guys?
Well, we're in the final stages. I've been to Congress. I've testified in Congress 3 times. I've been to numerous meetings with the FCC and DOJ. We have put our case forward. So I say we're in the final stages. We keep our fingers crossed. The commitments that we've made are quite large. We made a commitment to the U.S. government that we're going to build the world's most advanced 5G network covering every corner of the U.S. We made a commitment that we're going to increase jobs because this is going to be a growth story. We made a commitment that we're going to hit rural America, which currently they have no choice. We made a commitment we're going to invest $40 billion into the new network. Okay. And so I think we made all the necessary commitments. And I think the most important commitment we made is that we're going to have the best product and we're actually going to lower prices to consumers. So we hope that the U.S. is going to take a fresh look at this, and hopefully we're going to have a combined T-Mobile Sprint in the next few months.
Perfect. Very good. So we talked about your start. We talked about, Sprint. That was your, second thing that you did, and we all heard that you were changing the company in a good way, and we also are waiting for the merger to happen. Let's talk about Vision Fund. That is talk of the town. Actually, this is Silicon Valley. I think you're the largest fund in the world right now. So talk about the status of the first fund, like Vision Fund 1. How did it go? How much did you already invest? Do you have any leftovers? And then basically, what is the next thing? So a little bit about Vision Fund. I know that you are sitting on the board of ARM and Boston Dynamics and WeWork and a few. So give us a little bit of idea about that.
First, I'll tell you, how does the Vision Fund get started and what is the logic behind it, right? If you look at Masa, the way he divided his time the last few years was he used to say, I spend 97% of my time operating my companies and only 3% of my time investing. And the investing track record of SoftBank has been quite good. Masa started, he invested $10 billion. After a few years, those $10 billion turned into $250 billion. So we have a track record of delivering a 44% IRR over the course of the last 18 years. So we figured that if we could change things around and actually have Masa spend 97% of his time investing and 3% operating, we figured, what would happen. So therefore, we decided to create what is today the largest venture fund, the tech growth venture fund in the world, where the Vision Fund is a 100 billion fund. And what's interesting about the 100 billion fund is if you combine all the venture capital money in the world combined, doesn't amount to $100 billion. So, and the reason why we did that is we believe that we are on the verge of the most amazing revolution that the world has ever experienced, and that is the AI revolution. And therefore, we felt that, our investment thesis says that if you see that the world's most amazing or most valuable companies today, Amazon, Apple, Facebook, Google, or Alphabet, they have done an amazing job of utilizing data ahead of anybody else. But so far, the only thing that's been disrupted is that's been that advertising business, which is only 1% of the GDP, right? You look at the rest, you've disrupted some of retail, but that's only 6-7% of the GDP. And we believe that with the help of AI, the other 93% is open for disruption, meaning that there's $70 trillion economy, and we believe all of this is going to be disrupted in the next 10 or 20 years. So for that, we felt that we needed to make sure we had sufficient capital, sufficient dry powder in order for us to invest in the new economy, the next generation of companies that are going to pretty much disrupt everything that happens in the economy. So Vision Fund 1 launch, we thought it was going to take us a little longer to invest. As Masa said it publicly in the earnings statement, we're reaching the end of Vision Fund 1. It's been 2 years of investing. And if you do your calculations, we invest a little less than about $1 billion a week. Yes. We have over 80 to 90 companies invested. And then Masa also made it very public that we're now considering the evolution of Vision Fund 1 into a potential next Vision Fund. So we're very happy with the returns on Vision Fund 1. We also made it public in the earnings statement. We've been able to generate in excess of 44%, close to 45% equity IRR, which a lot of people disputed whether you could do the same with such a large amount of investment. So we feel that there's so much innovation going on in the world that we still have a long runway ahead of us.
So did you end up investing all 100 billion, or you have still left from the Fund 1?
No, we still have a little left, and then what you have to do is you always have to leave reserve for follow-on investments. Okay. But it's fair to say that we are getting close towards the end of Vision Fund, and I think we've done some amazing investments.
So Marcelo, to you, what are your top 3 investments from Vision Fund 1?
I think it's very hard to choose, right? Because there's 82 companies.
Yes.
And the 82 companies
Something you like, maybe
are
personally.
incredible, special. So they're all special. I would say that our investment thesis is we focus on a cluster of number ones. We like companies that are number one or have the potential to be number one, and that they're utilizing artificial intelligence to enhance their business model to disrupt traditional industries or to basically change the way we live, the way we work. I mean, we have some, we can start by saying we love ride sharing. Yeah. I mean, the way what Uber has transformed transportation is quite amazing.
Yes.
So we've been a large investor in ride sharing all over the world, in Uber, in Didi, in Ola, in Grab, which are the leading ride sharing companies in the world.
Yep.
We love what's happening with food delivery. And I was talking to a few millennials who have decided that they don't go to restaurants anymore. They let the restaurants come to their home. We love that. I mean, that is growing incredibly around the world, the amount of people who utilize their app to basically order their favorite food from the restaurants. We love healthcare, you know, a company like Guardant Health,
Yes.
that now you have the ability to basically pool just take a small amount of blood work, and we're able to tell you what stage your cancer is and what potentially is the better treatment for your cancer. That's very different. Those people who have been associated with cancer, traditionally you had to do a tissue check that was quite painful and expensive. We love Katerra, the fact that they can build prefabricated homes in 48 hours. We love what DoorDash is doing, how they're innovating and taking not only restaurants to your home, but also starting to take groceries and starting to take stuff you buy at Walmart, other places to your home. And I can go on and on. I mean, we have we love Oyo Hotels,
Yes.
which we anticipate Oyo will be the leading AI hospitality company in the world. We think they're going to surpass Marriott quite soon. And, it's a 25-year-old entrepreneur who's been doing this for less than 10 years. And on and on and on. I mean, I think we have the most amazing platforms that any group, any fund has ever put together.
Yeah.
And it's fascinating to see these companies starting to work together with each other.
Perfect. So let's talk a little bit about your next fund. How big it is going to be? Can you predict?
I mean, we try not to say that, but what I can tell is, as you can imagine, when you have a fund that's as successful as Vision Fund 1, it's fair to say that we think that the demand is going to be the same. So the first, at the beginning is just our own capital. What makes the Vision Fund or any of our funds so special is that a large LPs ourselves. It is basically SoftBank's money, it's management's money. So we're fully committed, and I would say it's a little bit easier to get other LPs to jump in when you're basically putting your own money or your own capital to work. So we think it's going to be a significant fund. There's no change in terms of our investment philosophy, only betting companies that use AI. We think that the AI revolution that the world is starting to experience is just going to basically, the level of disruption and innovation that we're going to see in the next 20 years is going to be way bigger than the last 300 years. We've been through the broadband revolution, we've been where you've seen, or the internet revolution. We think this is significantly bigger, more impactful.
Yes.
So, we're looking at hundreds and hundreds of companies every week, and then we choose the one company a week that we invest in.
Perfect. So if someone wants to get your money from Vision Fund 2, maybe, what do they have to do? What is it that you look for in a company when you invest?
And I think the most important part are those entrepreneurs who understand that artificial intelligence is basically going to redefine every single industry as we know it, right? And those are the businesses that can grow into becoming a platform. Because what artificial intelligence is basically one thing, and that's called prediction. So entrepreneurs that have the ability to utilize data to predict, right? When you see so many Uber cars that are parked within 5 to 7 minutes of your ride of where you are, it's not that driver just magically happened to show up there, right? There's a heat map that allows you to manage, to balance supply and demand. A lot of fragmentation, both in the supply and in the amount of customers. And those are the businesses that we like, those businesses that create a network effect, those businesses that have the ability to massively scale, and those businesses that have the ability to basically change the way today we live our lives. And those are the businesses that we like to invest. So.
Perfect. So I think you're focusing a lot on AI, right? And the prediction, basically, right?
100%.
So the AI company is doing good. In terms of like AI, everybody's saying that is the next big thing. From your perspective, what are the next big thing? Is it only AI or something else also that you will see in the upcoming future?
And I think if you look at what is happening, why AI is going to redefine everything. Let's start first with the world is building the most advanced communications companies. And this is why 5G is so important, because you're able to reduce latency. Okay, you're able to provide, we spec if you look at the amount of people today that live on Earth, there's 7 billion people. Fast forward a few more years, we'll get to 10 billion people. But what's going to happen is we expect that in the future, there's going to be close to 1 trillion connected things. So it's 10 billion people to 1 trillion connected things. That means 100 connected things, if not more, per person. And all of those connected things are basically going to be able to, they're going to have a tremendous amount of data that is going to be transmitted to high computers that are basically going to be able to have the right algorithms to basically predict what is going to happen. And that is why you're going to see the combination of IoT, 5G, and AI, and that's where the true robotics come into place. And there's going to be tens of millions of robots, and robots is not what we know as the humanoid robots. Robots are going to be those autonomous cars that are transporting people. Robots are going to be those autonomous cars that are transporting goods and services. So when I look at the next big thing is, how do you have autonomous vehicles basically redefine the way we move, redefine the way goods can move, and that is a lot closer than what we have anticipated. So that is one trend that it cannot go away. Another trend that we see is the last mile logistics or last mile delivery. The consumer, I remember back then, not too long ago, how it was such a big deal. Amazon Prime was such a big deal. The fact that you were able to order something and get it 1 or 2 days later. That was revolutionary. Consumers want immediate gratification. Consumers want to have the ability right now to order something and get it on same-day delivery. So you want to order something in the morning, you want to get it in the afternoon. But what consumers are starting to demand right now is the fact that they want to get 15 or 30-minute delivery. And the way that changes is those enormous distribution centers that we used to have around the country. You don't need that anymore. What you need are those micro-fulfillment centers that are going to be located so close to where you live, and they're going to be able, through robotics, to be able to pack a supermarket into a small building, to be able to pack a pharmacy into a small building, or to pack 10 or 20 restaurants, industrial kitchens, and then have a robotic car basically deliver what you order in less than 15 minutes. That's what customers. We're going to see a lot more predictions in our lives. I mean, I always joke around with what happens in supermarkets. I mean, if you think today the life of people who do grocery shopping is, you leave your home, you go to your car, you drive 30 minutes or 20 minutes to find a supermarket, you have to go find a parking spot, then after that you got to walk in the supermarket, you walk the same miles, and 90% of the time you buy the exact same thing week over week. You go to your cashier, and then the cashier tells you, hey, paper or plastic? You probably say paper. Cashier puts it together, you walk to your car, you park your car, you have to do 2 rides. And if you think about it, it's like we buy the same thing. If you actually see what you've been buying the last few years, is you buy the same thing week over week. So wouldn't it be a little more normal if the app actually tells you, hey, we think this is what you need to order? The app will get it 99.9% right. You just hit 1 click, and then suddenly the delivery gets to your home, maybe on a daily basis, so what you buy is actually fresh. So stuff like that, we're going to see that we're going to massively change. And there are companies already working on that model. There are some countries that are already seeing that. So the level of innovation and disruption, as we know it, based on data being transmitted, is going to forever change the way, the way we do things. So to the entrepreneurs in the audience, is the only advice that we can give you is whatever business you're in, make sure that you have a big AI component that helps you, predict what's going to happen, utilizing predictive business models.
So you need to have AI, guys. That's all we need at this point.
At least from our end.
From SoftBank, funds perspective. So we also have some large corporations here, right? And innovation for large corporations actually becomes a nightmare. And as I mentioned to you earlier, that many of our LPs or limited partners are large corporations. We have received fund as Pegasus from 34 large corporations around the world. And innovation is very difficult for them. So I know that you were part of the startup, Brightstar, and it became a very big startup. And then you were also part of managing Sprint, and you grew the company to a massive level. So can you tell me, for the large corporate partners here, that what are the best things that large corporations can do to be innovative? What are the techniques or formulas to follow to actually be innovative and be part of the innovation, innovation fiasco going on?
Yeah. So we live this, we are a large corporation at SoftBank. we manage 400 and depends on the price of our assets, but we manage over $400 billion in terms of our own operating companies. We have a lot of large operating companies, and in terms of a fund. And this is something that we discuss a lot with Masa. And I say, how do we make sure that as large corporations, we don't turn complacent and we don't have somebody else come and basically disrupt our business? And what Masa had basically said since day one, not only say it, but we actually practice, is we constantly are trying to disrupt ourselves. And we make big, bold decisions in terms of, when we choose one business model that we think is going to be the future, we basically attach ourselves to that business model, and we even say goodbye to our traditional business models. And I'll share a story with you guys where Masa came to us and said, the future of our companies on investing. I said, yes, Masa, but we got these enormous companies that are worth hundreds of billions of dollars that are part of our portfolio. He says, you don't understand, the future of our companies is in investing. So even though at that point in time it was only 3%, Masa basically is able to say goodbye to my operating companies. He gives it to the management team, to us, and he's gone. And when we go back and we say, hey, Masa, we have this problem in this company, he says, I'm gone. I have nothing to do with those companies. You guys manage those companies. Let me go manage in what the future of SoftBank is going to be, which in this case is investing. So he leaves, maybe the right way not to call it the legacy, but he leaves the foundational business to SoftBank, to ourselves. He says, you got to go manage it, and he puts 100% to a business model that has not been proven, to new business models, and he puts 100% of his energy, and that takes a lot of guts, because the normal thing is, you try to protect your business model, when a lot of us know that, our business model is not going to be long-term sustainable. I mean, I look at some of the banks that, now we just launched a new fund a couple of weeks ago, which is the Innovation Fund, which is a $5 billion technology fund dedicated to Latin America. And when you go to a market and you see that that banks are charging 200% interest rates in credit cards, if I'm that bank, I know sooner or later, this cannot last forever. Yeah. But what I see a lot of these companies, what they try to do is just to protect their core business, hoping it's going to last forever. And we've seen so many companies. If you go and you look, we do this exercise a lot, and you look, hey, what were the top 10 most valuable companies 20 years ago? And what were the top 10 more valuable companies this year? None of them are the same. I think Microsoft is the only one at one point in time that basically is still, but you look, 7 out of the 10 most valuable companies are technology companies. I think the other one is JP Morgan, and I can't remember what is the other two. Warren Buffett, Berkshire Hathaway, and then, if I'm not mistaken, Procter & Gamble. Those are the companies. And if you go back in 10, 20 years ago, none of those companies, except for Microsoft, remained there. And that is the big problem when you have these business models with traditional business models. If you do not disrupt yourself, somebody else will come and disrupt you. And with the speed of the internet, with the globalization of our economies, when something pops and something is a disruptive business model, things change. Things change so fast. Look at Uber, right?
Yes.
Uber has turned into a verb today. You say, I'm going to Uber to your house. Think about that. Go back 10 years ago, there was no Uber. It didn't exist. There were taxis and limo companies. Today, you go to Manhattan, and you don't see that many limo companies or that many taxis anymore.
Very good. So it looks like that, the large corporations, they need to be on the edge, and the way they can do this is innovate through investments in some sense, because they get to work with innovative ideas that way, right? And that's the best way to go, and that's what you guys are doing at So that this is Startup World Cup, so
yes.
We have had regional competition in 35 countries, and then we had a semi-final 2 days ago, and then we did a semi-final, and then we selected 12 companies which are coming on a stage at around 4 o'clock, and we'll decide the World Cup champion. Will you be kind enough to interview the Startup World Cup champion?
Yes, I will. I'd love not
Guys, round of applause, right?
Not only we were going to love to potentially interview the World Cup champion, but I find it fascinating that you're able to put together a global entrepreneurship challenge, and then be able to choose, who's going to be. I think for all of us in the venture world, I think it'll be a safe investment to potentially co-invest with you guys in whoever you choose to be the top 3.
Yeah.
Because You know, I'm certain that the champion is going to be a company that has a tremendous future.
Yes.
I've been hearing of the ones that won 2 years ago, the ones that won last year, and the bright future that they have ahead. So I think it's great.
Thank you very much. So, any last minute advice to the entrepreneurs who are coming from all over the world? We're doing it in 35 countries, right? And we wanted to create, when you created this platform, it was to give people hopes and inspiration so that they can create the next generation technology, right? So, any last minute advice to the entrepreneurs of the world from the SoftBank Group?
I'll tell you, one is, we've talked a little about AI, but I'll tell more importantly is that's just technology, right? The passion and the ability to dream big, to think of big ideas, combined with technology is what you're going to be able to succeed. It doesn't matter what country you're coming from. You know, I came from a tiny country called Bolivia, which a lot of people don't even know where Bolivia is. And I was able to create the world's largest company in my industry. So you should never limit yourself to country limitations. Or I understand that there's one of the finalists is from Mauritius, which I find is fascinating.
Yeah,
And
Mauritius is in semi-finals today, right? Oh, there they are. Mauritius
and that's
guys, yes.
and that's the beauty of the world we live in. You know, when you live in an ever-connected world with all of us have a democratic access to the internet and communications,
Yes.
you're no longer limited to where you are. So you can build the world's most exciting companies regardless of where you are. You just got to make sure that you think big, you have passion, and remember to use AI as you build your companies. So thank you.
Thank you very much.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you.